Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Tobias. This channel is where true feeling nightmares come to life. The stories you're about to hear sink in quietly, linger in your thoughts, and follow you into the dark long after the lights go out. Before we begin, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss new stories every week. Now get comfortable, lower the lights, and let's get right into tonight's story. This one's going to be called, I Filmed Ghost Soldiers at Gettysburg. What happened to the tape still haunts me. I've always hated how people talk about Gettysburg like it's a theme park. They say haunted the way they say historic, with a practiced half smile like they're pitching you something. Ghost tours, candlelight walks, little shops selling bullet replicas, and authentic Union kepis made in China. People take selfies at Devil's Den like a scenic overlook and not a place where men crawled into the rocks to die. I wasn't immune to it either. I'd been there once as a kid on a school trip, and I remember the heat, the teacher's voice, and the way the tall grass waved like it was trying to cover everything back up. I remember how the air felt heavier, like the land was holding its breath. Years later, I couldn't shake the thought that there were places in this country where the past didn't pass. Not really. It just settled into the soil and waited. That's why I went back. Not for a tour, not for photos, not for some did you know pamphlet I'd forget as soon as I got home. I went because my friend Mason would not shut up about a story he'd heard from a ranger. We were sitting in his kitchen after work, both of us half dead from the week, scrolling through our phones and eating whatever was closest to food that didn't require effort. Mason had been on a Gettysburg kick for months. Documentaries, podcasts, books with cracked spines and underlined sentences. He'd played one of those videos where someone captures an EVP in a cemetery. It was mostly wind, with a faint squeak in the background that the narrator insisted was a whisper saying, "Help me." I rolled my eyes. But Mason leaned forward like he was watching a courtroom confession. "You don't believe in any of it?" he said. And it was like that was an accusation. "I believe people love attention," I told him, "and I believe microphones pick up weird stuff." Mason was the kind of guy who couldn't accept maybe as an answer. If something was unexplained, it didn't make him shrug. It made him hungry. "There's a spot," he said, lowering his voice even though we were alone. "A stretch along the fields where pickets charged crossed," the ranger said off the record, "that sometimes late at night you can hear it. Not just like a noise, like you're standing inside it." I snorted. "He told you this, or you heard it from a guy who heard it from a guy?" Mason looked offended. "He told my cousin. My cousin was doing that volunteer program." "That's still a guy who heard it from a guy." Mason ignored me, pulling his phone out and bringing up a map. He zoomed in, tapping a point with his thumb. "Here," he said, "and around Devil's Den too. People talk about shadows moving between the rocks, full-bodied apparitions like actual soldiers. I should have been the responsible one. I should have said, 'No, that's stupid,' and ended it there. Instead, I said, 'If we go there, we go late. No tour groups, no stage nonsense.'" Mason's grin was immediate, like he'd been waiting for my resistance to crack. "Tonight," he said. I laughed. "No." But then the week ended, and Friday came with that particular restlessness that makes you want to do something reckless just to feel like you're alive. Mason texted me all day, sending links to articles and photos and a voice message where he said, "Come on, one night. We'll be in and out. It'll be an adventure." By the time he pulled into my driveway, it was already dark. He packed like we were going camping. Flashlights, extra batteries, a portable charger, a cheap handheld camcorder that he bought online, and a tripod that looked at it had survived a war of its own. He'd also brought a small first aid kit, which I mocked until he reminded me that people twisted ankles on uneven ground all the time. "Also," he said, patting the camcorder like it was a pet, "this thing has night mode. Night mode on those is basically green static," I said. He shrugged. "Green static is still something." We drove the 2 hours in a silence that wasn't uncomfortable so much as expectant. Mason kept checking the time, like he was afraid the night would run out. I watched the darkness outside the windows and felt my skepticism harden into something else. Not belief, not exactly, just awareness. Gettysburg at night doesn't feel like other places at night. When we rolled into the town, it was quiet in a way that made the streetlights feel too bright. Shops were closed, tour buses gone. The little downtown looked like a postcard of itself. We parked near one of the public lots where the rules were posted on a sign that warned against trespassing, vandalism, and after-hours access in certain areas. The battlefield itself is a national military park, and while some roads are open late, there are closures and regulations that shift depending on the season. Mason read the sign like it was a challenge. "We're not breaking anything," he said quickly, anticipating me. "We're just looking." "Looking from where we're allowed," I said. "I'm not getting arrested for your ghost hobby." He lifted both hands. "Scout's honor." Mason had never been a scout. We drove out towards the park roads, the car headlights cutting through the dark and sweeping across the monuments that looked like pale teeth in the night. It's different when the statues aren't framed by daylight. They're not inspirational. They're watchful. We passed the Pennsylvania Memorial, huge and silent. Mason slowed down like he expected it to move. "Imagine," he whispered, "standing out here when it was happening. Imagine standing out here when you can't see where you're going," I muttered, eyeing the road. The trees leaned in on both sides, branches threading together overhead like fingers. Mason's phone map guided us towards the open fields where Pickett's charge had unfolded. He wanted to set up near the angle where the stone wall bends, the high water mark of the Confederacy, the place textbooks love to point at like history can be pinned to one spot. We found a pull-off area and parked, the engine ticking as it cooled down, and as it cooled, sounding too loud in the quiet. Outside, the air was cold enough to sting the inside of my nose. The sky was clear, black domes scattered with stars. There was no wind. The grass lay still. Mason breathed out like he'd been holding it since we left home. "Okay," he said, rubbing his hands. "Okay, this is it." He carried the tripod and camcorder while I took the flashlights. We didn't talk much as we walked away from the car. Our shoes brushed the grass and the sound felt intrusive. I didn't like that there were no other people. I didn't like that I couldn't hear insects or distant highway or anything that made the world feel normal. We set up the tripod facing the open field, angled towards the low rise where the charge would have advanced. The stone wall was a dark line in the distance, barely visible. Mason clicked the camcorder on and adjusted the lens. "Tell the camera what we're doing," he said. "No," I replied immediately. "Come on, it's for context." "For the police," I said. Mason sighed dramatically and turned on the camcorder towards himself. "It's Friday night," he narrated softly, voice hushed as if afraid to wake something, "and we're at Gettysburg. We're going to see if the stories are real." He turned it towards me. I stared at the lens, irritated by how the little red recording light looked like an eye. "We're here because Mason can't take a hobby like a normal person," I said. "We're not doing anything stupid. We're staying on public areas. If we see something, we leave. Or if we see nothing, we leave." Mason swung it back on himself. "He says he doesn't believe." "I don't," I said, but my voice came out flatter than I meant. Mason set the camcorder on the tripod and aimed it across the field. He also had his phone recording audio, tucked it into his jacket pocket with the microphone exposed. "Just in case," he said. We stood there, two grown men in the cold grass, staring out into the darkness like it owed us an explanation. At first, nothing happened. Just the same heavy quiet and distant, barely there sound of something, maybe a car far away, maybe wind through trees we couldn't see. Mason shifted from foot to foot, trying to hide his impatience. "This is why people fake it," I said under my breath, "because waiting is boring." Mason gave me a look and turned his head slowly, scanning. And that's when I noticed it. A smell. It started faint, like someone striking a match far away. A sharpness in the air that didn't belong in an open field. Smoke. I turned, expecting to see Mason holding a cigarette, forgetting he didn't smoke. My flashlight beam cut across the jacket, and his face pale in the light. He looked back at me, frowning. "What? You smell that?" He sniffed, his eyes widened. "Yeah." The smell thickened in seconds, blooming into something that had been lit nearby. Not campfire smoke, not a wood smoke. It was acrid, metallic, like old gunpowder. I swallowed, feeling my throat tighten. Mason's smile faltered. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, that's That's something. Could be someone burning brush, I said automatically, but the word sounded weak even to me. There was no wind to carry it, and no glow on the horizon. Mason lifted his flashlight and swept it across the field. The beam faded into darkness before it reached the wall. Do you hear it? He asked. I held my breath. At first, I heard nothing but my own pulse. Then far away, so faint I almost convinced myself I imagined it, there was a sound like a low murmur. Not wind. Voices, but not in any language I could pick out, just the indistinct swell of many throats. Mason's mouth fell open slightly. I hated that I could see excitement in his face. He lifted the camcorder off the tripod and held it in his hands, angling it towards the darkness. Guys, he whispered into it like he was already speaking to an audience. I don't know if you can hear this, but I grabbed his sleeve. Don't start talking like that. He jerked, annoyed, but didn't pull away. The murmur grew louder. And then it wasn't a murmur anymore. It was shouting. It rolled across the field like a wave, carrying words that snapped into focus in a way that made my blood turn cold. Forward. Hold the line. God, my leg. It wasn't like hearing a recording. It was like hearing someone on the other side of the field. It sounded like it was inside of the night. Mason's camcorder trembled. Holy. I shushed him without thinking. My finger pressed to my lips because some instinct older than logic told me that noise mattered. The smell of smoke thickened until it felt like breathing through my cloth. My eyes watered. Then the first scream tore through the air. It wasn't a movie scream. It wasn't theatrical or clean. It was the sound of a human being and being in pain so absolute that their voice broke. It was raw and ragged and desperate, and it rose and fell like it couldn't decide whether to keep living. Mason froze, his face lit pale green by the camcorder's night mode screen. Is this, he started, and then the night changed. A shape moved across the field. At first, I thought it was fog because it drifted low, pale against the darker grass, but it was too defined, like it had edges, like it had weight, and then another shape. Then another. They appeared in clusters, scattered and reforming, moving in a way that made my brain strain to interpret it. They weren't solid, not exactly. They shimmered like a heat haze, but I couldn't see them. Men, dozens of them, maybe more, advancing across the open ground in a ragged line. Their bodies flickered, their outlines glitched between clear and translucent. Some carried rifles, some had no weapons at all, arms pumping as they ran. Their uniforms were wrong in a way the old photographs were wrong, washed out colors, but with details sharp as knives. I could see straps crossing chest, the rim of a cap, the flare of a coat. I could see one man stumble, and the way his knees buckled like it didn't work anymore. And the sound. The sound wasn't just voices, it was everything. The boom of cannon fire, deep enough to rattle my teeth. The crack of rifles like snapping branches. The thud of something heavy hitting earth. Horses screaming, an animal sound that always feels like it shouldn't exist. The air vibrated. Mason made a strangled noise, half laugh, half sob. We got it, he breathed, lifting the camcorder higher. We got it. Something whistled overhead. I ducked instinctively, knowing that I knew it couldn't hit me. The whistling ended in a distant thunk, like something burying itself into the ground. I straightened slowly, heart hammering, and looked at Mason. His face had drained of color. Did you hear that? Yeah. Another scream, this one closer, too close. I turned towards the field and the figures had advanced. They were no longer distant shapes. They were halfway across, moving across the wall, towards us. Mason's flashlight beam swept across them, and for a second one of the men snapped into terrible clarity. He looked young, younger than me, maybe 18, maybe 19. His face was smeared with dirt and something dark. His eyes were wide and shining, mouth open as he gasped for breath. His hands clutched a rifle, and when the flashlight hit him, his head turned sharply as if he could see the light, as if he could see us. The beam trembled in my hand. The man's lips moved, and I heard a voice right there in the cold air between us say, "Please." Mason's breath hitched. Did he just... The man surged forward and his body blurred again, dissolving back into that flickering half state. I took a step back without thinking. My foot caught on uneven ground. I almost fell. We need to go, I said, voice tight. Mason stared at the camcorder screen, mesmerized. Wait, just another cannon blast closer. The air It shook the air like thunder. I flinched so hard my shoulders hurt. And then I saw something I can't explain, away as residual haunting, or energy echo, or whatever cute term people use to make horror sound scientific. A figure rose from the grass near the center of the field, as if it had been lying there the whole time and now remembered it was supposed to stand. This one didn't run with the others. This one stood still. It was taller, broader. Its outline was darker, more solid, like a stain against the night. The others flickered around it like moths around a flame, but it didn't flicker. It turned its head slowly, like a compass needle finding north, and it looked straight at us. The shouting dipped for a second, and the entire battlefield held its breath. Even the gunfire seemed to fade, muffled, distant. The smile changed. Under the smoke and metal, there was something else, sweet and rotten. Blood. My stomach rolled. Mason whispered, "Do you see that?" Yeah. The dark figure began to move, not towards the wall, not towards the charge, towards us. Its steps were slow, deliberate. Each movement seemed to drag the night with it, like it was pulling a shadow behind it. Mason backed up, still filming. "Okay," he said shakily. "Okay, maybe this is enough." I grabbed his arm hard. "Now. We're leaving now." Mason finally tore his eyes from the camcorder screen and looked at me. The excitement was gone. What was left was fear. We turned together and started walking fast back towards the car, flashlight bouncing. Behind us, the battle noise surged again, louder, frantic, like the moment had passed and the violence had resumed. But something else followed. Not footsteps, a dragging sound like heavy cloth over grass. Mason glanced over his shoulder, and I saw his face contort. "It's coming," he whispered. "Don't look," I snapped. "Just move." We moved faster. The field between us and the car didn't seem that big when we walked out. Now it stretched like it was trying to keep us. The night around us felt wrong, like the air had thickened. My flashlight beam seemed weaker, swallowed by darkness. Then Mason stumbled. I heard him gasp, and the camcorder clatter against the tripod leg as he caught himself. "Go," I told him, grabbing his elbow to steady him. My foot." "Move," I said, not caring if I sounded cruel, because I could hear it. That dragging sound had become a scrape, like something hard hitting rock, and it layered over it was a noise that made my skin crawl, a wet, raspy breathing that didn't belong to any animal I knew. Mason started running. I ran too. The cold air slicing my lungs, the grass slapped at my shins, the car's silhouette ahead looking impossibly far. Behind us, the battle's screams arose, and for a moment I thought I heard a chorus of voices, men shouting, pleading, crying out for mothers and God and mercy. And then, cutting through all of it, was one sound that didn't fit. A long, warbling howl. Not a wolf, not a coyote, not anything naturally. It sounded like a man trying to scream with a throat full of water. Mason made a choking noise and ran harder, clutching the camcorder to his chest like it was life itself. The howl came again, closer. The air vibrated with it. I didn't want to look back. Everything in me screamed not to, but my head turned anyways. For a half second, my flashlight beam caught the field behind us, and what it illuminated stole my breath. The dark figure was no longer at the center of the field. It was close enough that I could see its shape clearly. It looked like a soldier, but wrong. The proportions were off. Its limbs too long, its shoulders too broad. Its face was blurred, like it didn't have one consistent form, like it was a smear of darkness where features should be, and something in it glinted, reflecting my flashlight. Eyes, maybe, or something else entirely. And trailing behind it, flickering in and out, were other shapes. Men, lots of them, not running the charge anymore, but moving in a confused, swirling mass, as if the battlefield had shifted and now its focus was us. One of them stumbled, reaching out, mouth open in a silent cry, and then his body snapped back into place and he was gone again, like a skipped frame. The dark figure kept coming. It didn't run. It didn't need to. It was too close. I turned forward and sprinted, my legs pumping so hard they burned. I could hear Mason ahead of me, breath ragged. The car finally loomed, metal reflecting like a faint glint of starlight. Mason fumbled for the keys, hands shaking so violently I thought he'd dropped them. He hit the unlock button twice, like the first time didn't count. The lights flashed, and that tiny beep felt like a siren. We threw ourselves into the car. Mason into the driver's seat, me into the passenger. Mason slammed the door so hard that the window rattled. The camcorder banged against the steering wheel. Go, I shouted. Mason shoved the key into the ignition and turned. Nothing. The dashboard lights flickered, then died. Mason froze. No, he whispered. No, no, no. He twisted the key again. The starter clicked weakly. The lights blinked. The smell of smoke flooded the car like it had been waiting outside. I looked out the windshield, and for a second in the dim wash of the car's dead interior light, I saw movement in the field. Shadows shifting. Mason turned the key a third time, and the engine finally coughed to life like it had been pulled out of the sleep. The dashboard lit up. The radio set to nothing, burst with static so loud it made me jump. Mason threw it into drive and hit the gas. The tires spun for a second, grabbing at the grass, and then we lurched forward onto the road. Mason didn't care about speed limits. He drove like something was attached to the bumper. As we tore down the park road, the static on the radio wavered and dipped, and for a moment, just for a moment, I heard something in it. A voice, faint and thin, like something speaking through cloth. Stay. Mason slammed the radio off with his palm. Neither of us spoke for the first 10 minutes. We just drove, breathing hard, hands tight on the wheel and the door handle, eyes darting to mirrors and windows like we expected to see figures standing in the road. Only when the park lights faded behind us and the normal world became creeping back, street lights, distant traffic, and glow of gas stations, did Mason's breathing slow enough that he could talk. He said it like a confession. We got it. I stared at him. What? He lifted the camcorder slightly, like it was proof. We got it on video. I didn't answer right away, because part of me didn't want it to be true. And if we had video, then it meant what we saw was real. Not a shared hallucination, not adrenaline. Real. Mason glanced at me and his face was pale. Too bright. You saw too, right? I'm not. I saw it, I said. I heard it. I smelled it. Don't ask me to explain it. Mason swallowed. I want to see it. I didn't want to see it. When we got back to his house, because neither of us wanted to be alone, we set the camcorder on his kitchen table like it was something dangerous. Mason plugged it into his laptop with trembling hands. The camcorder's screen still showed faint green static from night mode. The little red light was off now. Dead. Harmless. Mason opened up the video files. There were 3 clips. The first was Mason's little intro, him whispering into the camera. The second was longer, almost 20 minutes, starting from when we set up the tripod. The third was only a few seconds long, likely when he hit record while running. Mason clicked the second clip. The video loaded. At first, it was exactly what you'd expect. A dark field, grainy, green image, our flashlights bobbing. Audio picked up our breathing and faint night sounds. Mason leaned forward, eyes hungry. Then the video stuttered. The screen froze for a second, then jumped forward. The audio warped, stretching like tape being chewed. Mason frowned, clicking the timeline back a few seconds. He played it again. Same thing. The video kept stuttering, freezing, skipping. Every time it tried to get to the part where the smoke smell started, the image broke apart into blocks of pixelated green and black. The audio turned into a low, distorted moan. Mason paused the video, jaw tight. That's weird. Maybe the camera sucks, I offered, though my stomach had already tightened into dread. Mason copied the file to the laptop, then tried to play it from there. The same thing. He tried it on a different media player. Same thing. He tried converting the file. The converter failed, throwing an error message about corrupted data. Mason's hands clenched into fist. No way. He unplugged the camcorder and pulled the memory card, sliding it into a reader. He opened the files directly. The first clip played fine. The second clip had changed. The file name was the same. The length was still 20 minutes, but the thumbnail preview was just black. Mason clicked it again. This time, this video didn't show the field at all. It showed green static, not the normal kind. This was thick, crawling, alive-looking static, like something breathing behind it. The audio was a harsh hiss with faint layered sounds buried underneath. Mason turned the volume up, faced inches from the laptop speaker. At first, there was only hiss. Then, very faintly under the noise, I heard something that made my skin prickle. A distant boom, a rifle crack, a scream. Mason's eyes widened. It's in there. And then, like the static was clearing its throat, a voice surfaced. Not Mason's, not mine. An old voice, rough, strained, like it had been dragged through smoke. It said very clearly, "Leave it." Mason jerked back so fast his chair scraped the floor. The static surged louder, almost angry. The screen flickered, and for half a second the green noise formed a shape, something like a face pressed against the glass, features warped, mouth opened too wide. Then the laptop made a loud pop and the screen went black. The room was suddenly silent except for our breathing. Mason stared at the dead laptop, chest rising and falling fast. He whispered. I didn't do anything. I didn't move. My hands were cold, fingers numb. Mason reached out slowly, like touching the laptop might bite him, and pressed the power button. Nothing. He unplugged it, plugged it back in. Nothing. Then he turned to the camcorder. The camcorder screen was black too. He pressed the power button. Nothing. He opened the battery compartment and pulled it out. Put it back. Nothing. Mason's eyes flicked to me, panicked now, full and naked. How? I didn't answer because I didn't know. But the smell was back, not as strong as in the field, but there. Thin and sharp, like someone had struck a match in the next room. Mason sniffs, face twisting. Do you smell that? I nodded slowly. Mason stood up, moving like he wasn't sure gravity was reliable. He walked into the kitchen window, and kitchen window and looked out into his backyard. The yard was dark, lit only by a porch light. Nothing moved, but Mason's shoulders tensed anyways. Maybe it followed us, he whispered. That's not how I started then stopped, because what did I know? I just watched a battlefield appear out of thin air. Mason turned away from the window and looked at the camcorder again like he was personally offended by its silence. I'm not losing this, he said, voice tight. He grabbed the camcorder and carried it to his basement workshop, where he had tools and electronics junk. I followed because I didn't want to be alone in his kitchen with the smell. He set to the camcorder on his workbench and started unscrewing the casing with shaking hands. Mason, what are you doing? Getting the tape, he said. It's not digital only. He has that mini DVD slot. I put one in because I wanted a backup. My stomach sank. Use tape? Yeah, he said quickly. Old school backup. If the files get corrupted, the tape should still have it. He opened the compartment and pulled the tiny cassette out, holding it like it was precious. The plastic felt normal, the little spools visible through the clear window. Mason's hands were careful, almost reverent. He popped open an old camcorder deck he kept from his college film class and slipped the tape in. The deck whirred to life, pulling the tape inside. Mason hit play. For 2 seconds, the screen showed our field, green grass, flashlight beam. Then the image warped, twisting sideways like the picture was melting. The sound became a choking hiss. The tape deck made a grinding noise, and then it stopped dead with a harsh metallic clunk. Mason swore and hit eject. The deck whined and then spit the tape out. Mason grabbed it and stared at it. The clear window showed the tape inside, but it didn't look right. The ribbon wasn't neatly wound. It was twisted, crumpled, like someone had reached in and wrung it. Mason's mouth went dry. No. He cracked the cassette open carefully, prying it apart. The tape inside was shredded. Not snapped clean in one place, shredded in dozens of ragged tears like it had been chewed by something with blunt teeth. The film clung to itself in sticky curls. Mason just stood there, holding the ruined cassette, eyes wide and unfocused. He looked like someone who had been robbed, but we hadn't been robbed by a person. I stared at the mangled tape and felt a slow, creeping horror bloom in my chest, because it wasn't just that we'd lost proof. It was that something had actively stopped us from keeping it. I thought of the dark figure turning its head, looking straight at us as if it knew. Mason whispered, it didn't want to be recorded. And I couldn't argue. That night, neither of us slept. We sat in Mason's living room with every light on, the TV on low volume just for noise. Mason kept checking the front door lock like it might change on its own. Around 3 a.m., when exhaustion started making everything soft-edged and unreal, Mason's phone buzzed. He flinched like it was a gunshot. He pulled it out, staring at the screen. Then he held it up to me with shaking hands. There was a voicemail notification from an unknown number. Mason hadn't missed any calls, and there was no ring history, just a voicemail. He didn't want to play it. I could see it in the way his thumb hovered, trembling above the screen. Play it, I said, because I wanted to know that what kind of hell we're dealing with. Mason hit the speaker and pressed play. At first, there was only static, then faint. Beneath it, I heard something I recognized in my bones now. A cannon boom, a ripple of rifle fire, men shouting, and underneath all of it, close, intimate, as if someone was leaning into the phone. The same old rough voice whispered, "You brought it home." The voicemail ended. Mason stared at the phone like it had become poisonous. I felt my blood turn to ice because the voice didn't sound like a ghost caught in the recording. It sounded aware, like it knew where we were. And then upstairs, somewhere near the front of the house, we heard a sound, a slow scrape, like something heavy being dragged across wood. Mason's eyes snapped to mine, wide and wet with terror. We sat perfectly still, listening. The scrape came again, closer this time, and with it, faint as breath through smoke, came a sound that didn't belong in any house. A warbling, wet inhalation, like someone trying to breathe with a throat full of mud. I wanted to stand up and run. I wanted to leave Mason's house and never stop driving, but my body refused to leave because somewhere deep in me, I understood that something that I didn't want to accept. Whatever we saw out there wasn't just the past replaying itself. It could reach. The scrape stopped. For a long, terrifying moment, there was nothing. Then, from the front hallway, came a soft knock. Not loud, not urgent, just a polite, almost gentle knock. And Mason's lips parted, but no sound came out. The knock came again. 3 taps, evenly spaced. Then, through the thin silence of the house, a voice drifted in, faint, like it was speaking through the thick smoke. It wasn't Mason's, it wasn't mine. It was old. It said with quiet certainty, "Open up." I've never moved faster in my life. I grabbed Mason's arms and yanked him off the couch. He stumbled, nearly falling, and for a second he looked ready to fight me. But then the knock came again, harder. His face crumpled into pure panic. We ran, not towards the front door, not towards the hallway. We ran towards the back of the house, towards the sliding glass door that led into the yard. Mason fumbled with the lock, hands shaking. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting the hallway to fill with something dark and tall. The lock clicked. Mason yanked the door open. Cold night air rushed in. We ran out into the yard barefoot, the grass freezing under our feet. Mason's porch light cast a pale circle behind us, making the windows of the house glow like eyes. We stopped at the edge of the yard, chest heaving, staring back at the house like it might erupt. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the front porch light flickered. Once, twice, and then it went out. The house fell into darkness except for that faint glow of streetlight spilling from the road. Mason whispered, "It's inside." I wanted to tell him he was wrong. I wanted to tell him it was a prank, broken light, a coincidence, but I couldn't. Because the upstairs window, just for a second, I saw a shape, a silhouette, tall and wrong, standing behind the glass. And beside it, flickering like a bad signal, were smaller shapes. Men. Dozens of them. Their faces pale, their mouths open in silent cries, and then the shape lifted an arm slowly, not waving, pointing, down, towards us. Mason made a strangled sound, and in the quiet of the yard we heard it, so faint at first I thought it was my imagination. A distant boom, and then another, and then the crack of rifles, and then rising like a tide out of the darkness came the sound of men screaming for their lives, not from the battlefield, from Mason's house. And as we stood there, frozen in the cold grass, screams shifted into something else, something layered, unnatural, like many voices speaking through one throat. A whisper, a command. "You saw." The porch light flared back on suddenly, blinding bright. The window was empty. No silhouettes, no soldiers, just glass reflecting our terrified faces. Mason started sobbing. The sound raw and humiliating. He covered his mouth with his hand like he was trying to shove the fear back down. I didn't blame him, because I realized the worst part wasn't the ghost. It was the feeling that Gettysburg wasn't just haunted. It was hungry. And we'd walk into it, shined lights into it, pointed a camera at it like it was ours to capture. We treated it like it was a story, and now the story knew our names. We didn't go back inside. We stayed into the yard until dawn, watching the house like it was an enemy. When the sun rose, the screams stopped. The smell faded. The air warmed and the world tried to pretend it was normal. Mason called his brother to come over, and when his brother arrived, we stood in the driveway looking at Mason's house in broad daylight like we were waiting for someone to come out and laugh at us. Nothing happened. Mason's laptop never turned back on. He took it to a repair shop. The tech told him the motherboard was fried, like it had been hit with a surge. Mason swore the laptop was plugged into a surge protector. The camcorder was dead too. Batteries didn't matter. Different outlets didn't matter. It was as if the inside had been burned out. The shredded tape went back into a plastic bag, and Mason kept it into the drawer like a relic. We told ourselves we'd move on. We didn't, because once you hear it, once you truly hear it, you never forget. Sometimes late at night, when everything is quiet, I swear I can hear it again. A low murmur, distant at first, then shouting. Then a scream that rises and rises until it fills up the space behind my ribs. And if I sit very still, if I stop breathing long enough, I can catch something else in the distance. A slow scrape, like something heavy being dragged across the floor, and a voice old and rough whispering like smoke in my ear, "Leave it. I haven't been back to Gettysburg. I won't." Not because I'm scared of ghosts, but because I'm scared of whatever it was that looked straight at us in the field. Whatever it was that understood cameras, understood proof, understood the distance between memory and capture. Whatever it was that followed us home just to make sure we couldn't show anyone. Whatever it was that, for one long night, reminded me that the past isn't always a place you can visit safely. Sometimes it visits you. And sometimes it doesn't leave. And that's where we'll stop for tonight. If this story stayed with you, if it followed you a little too closely after it ended, then it did exactly what it was meant to do. If you enjoyed listening, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. New stories are waiting, some already written, some still finding their way out of the dark. Write a comment if you want to share your thoughts, or if you'd experienced something that you still can't explain. Until next time, keep the lights low, keep your doors locked, and try to get some sleep. Good night.